Hey guys, today we're going to be learning about the election of 1864 and the 13th Amendment. Here be your goals. Alright, so in 1864 the Civil War is still raging and it's election time. Elections don't stop just because of wars, at least not in the United States. So by 1864 the North was definitely winning the war. The blockade was in full effect, and it was getting hard to get basic stuff like nails and shoes in the South. The North had gained full control of the Mississippi River. Sherman had captured Atlanta and was marching down to the coast, burning everything in his path. And Robert E. Lee's army had been crippled at the Battle of Gettysburg. But the South still had one hope. And this hope was that Abraham Lincoln would lose the election of 1864 and that the new president would call off the war and allow the South to become independent, or at least allow it to rejoin the Union while keeping slavery. The election of 1864 was between Abraham Lincoln and George McClellan. Abraham Lincoln, whom we already know, was a Republican, and he argued that the North should keep fighting until the South had been completely beaten. He also insisted that slavery had already been ended in the South by the Emancipation Proclamation, and that it would be impossible to return anybody to slavery since that document had already been published. Basically, slavery was already over. George McClellan, who was a Democrat and a former U.S. general, thought differently. McClellan argued that we should try to get peace as quickly as possible, and he argued that the war could be ended immediately if the North would agree to allow the South to keep slavery. So basically, McClellan was willing to trade slavery for peace. And he painted Lincoln as a war-hungry abolitionist who would do anything it took to end slavery, whereas he said he was McClellan painted himself as a sort of rational compromiser who was willing to allow the South to keep its tradition of human bondage. There's a picture of McClellan there in his military uniform, and there's Abe chilling in a chair. So fortunately for the abolitionist effort, Lincoln wins the election, and he wins big time. He gets a majority in all of the northern states except for Kentucky, New Jersey, and Delaware. He even wins 2 slave states, Missouri and Maryland. And so on top of Abraham Lincoln keeping the presidency, the Republican Party wins more seats in Congress. Abraham Lincoln viewed this as basically a popular agreement that the war should continue to be fought until the South was ready to give up unconditionally. And he also believed that this meant that the North wanted the destruction of slavery, because if they hadn't wanted the destruction of slavery, they would have voted for McClellan. Thus, Lincoln decided to go ahead and press for the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment would eliminate slavery and make it unconstitutional for anybody in the United States to own slaves. It said that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for people who are in prison, would be allowed to exist in the United States, and that Congress would have whatever power necessary to enforce the end of slavery throughout the United States. Lincoln really wanted to get the 13th Amendment passed quickly because he knew that once the southern states were beaten and back into the country, they would never allow this amendment to go through. So there was kind of a time pressure because the war was winding up, and Lincoln wanted to make sure that slavery would never come back. So he needed to pass this amendment. So anyway, there's a lot of cajoling and a lot of behind-the-scenes politicking, but eventually the 13th Amendment does get passed by a 2/3 majority in Congress, leading to wild celebration in the streets of Washington, D.C. And what this vote meant, the passage of the 13th Amendment, what it meant was that the Old South, based on slavery, was done for, that it could never be reversed, and that no matter if the North won, that the South would be forced to transform and to enter into the modern age and to give up slavery forever. So that's it. We will talk more about this stuff tomorrow.